Welcome back to the Code Ryan podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to have to ignore my dog scratching himself in the background. But today, Colby joins me, and we're going to discuss some kind of React, Next.js stuff, maybe even get to if developers should be worried about AI taking all of our jobs and whether any of this is even worth it anymore, and get into some existential crisis stuff. But before we get to that, Colby, could you maybe just start on kind of what your tech story looks like so far?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a designer and engineer turned developer advocate, and moving back towards the middle a little bit as a developer experience engineer. So still being able to do a lot of engineering things, a little bit of design, but mostly trying to help people build awesome stuff by teaching them through content and those sort of things.
Awesome. And what would you say are like the main differences between like a developer advocate and like just like a normal developer? Because it's a term that I've definitely heard before. I think I have like a cursory understanding of what it is. But what would you kind of say a developer advocate does?
Yeah, so developer advocates usually are out advocating for the product that they work for. So I work at Cloudinary, for instance. So as part of that, my goal is to help make it as easy as possible for people to build awesome stuff, hopefully with Cloudinary. That's an important distinction between developer advocates versus like the marketing team, for instance, right? It's like, I want you to succeed. Hopefully that's with Cloudinary, but it doesn't have to be. But ultimately I'm working with the company to try to make that process as easy as possible.
Gotcha. So kind of like the goal is to kind of show developers why your product might be useful to them, and you're kind of advocating your product to developers. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like the developer would be the one who's implementing that, or, heads down working on their application or tool day to day. But yeah, it's also an important part of the process is taking developer community feedback and back to the team. So how we can help improve the product as well. So that's where it's really important for the developer advocates to be able to talk to the different developers in the community.
And what kind of like line of communication is that usually through? Is it like through maybe people raising issues on like a GitHub repo, or is it through social media, or what's kind of the line to communicate there?
Yeah, really all the above. And it really depends on the person. So for instance, like I'm an internet person, so I'm usually on Twitter helping wherever I can. Discord, I'm on Discord. I'm not as active in Discord, but if someone asks me, happy to always help. But then you have people who aren't internet people and just love to be at conferences, and I still go to conferences, but not as often as some other people. But really just, anywhere where developers hang out or communicate or, just talk and stuff, not in a, trying to find that and dig into it, more so just, being part of the community, and wherever that community is, trying to help people.
Gotcha. And, one thing that a lot of people look for when using a certain service or a library or something like that is like how strong the community is. And it sounds like developer advocates try to kind of strengthen that community and make sure that there's kind of support there and kind of ways to learn more about the product. Because I know for me, there's nothing worse than using like a JavaScript library that's 5 years old that has no support. And I'm just
Right.
trying to like go through old issues and everybody's complaining
Right.
in the Git repos about how awful
Right.
it is. And yeah, that's not a good situation to be in. So
Exactly. And I do like that kind of way of phrasing it. We do what we can to help strengthen the community, and it's the community first. And then, if you're using Cloudinary, happy to help with that, but ultimately it's the community first.
you were in more of kind of a developer advocate role, and then you've transitioned to more kind of developer experience, it sounds like. So is that more kind of DevOps sort of things with different things with like the workflows and stuff like that? Or what does kind of the developer experience role kind of look like?
Yeah, so it really depends on the team and the company that you're working for. But in my case, the way that we kind of have it set up, which I think is somewhat ideal, an ideal way to look at it, is we have the DevRel team, and then we have the developer advocacy side, where I'm the developer experience engineering side. And where the developer advocacy, traditionally, we all kind of, blur the lines a little bit between all of us. But the developer advocacy traditionally is more of that going into the community, going to events, giving talks, and all that stuff. I still do all that, but my main focus is the engineering side of things. So that might be creating code examples, creating demo applications. I created an SDK for Next.js for our product. things like that. So really anything code related is my strong focus.
Gotcha. So I was kind of thinking it was more like DevOps sort of stuff that you're doing. So
Yeah.
more so like kind of advocating for more people, like the focusing on the code itself rather than maybe like creating social media posts and stuff like that. Well, maybe you're still doing that, but maybe focusing on the code aspect of things rather than like kind of more general community stuff, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And like I said, our team blurs the line. So like my colleague who's on the advocacy side, Tomasz Biros, he totally does a bunch of coding stuff. I do a bunch of advocacy stuff. So yeah, it really just depends. But if you're familiar with the term user experience, like it's kind of similar, but it's developer experience where we're focused on enhancing that experience as much as we can, right? So that might mean in Next.js, creating the easiest way to work with Cloudinary in a Next.js application, right? So that's where I come in and it's my focus.
Gotcha. And I think that's a really good way to frame it, as well as some of these terms get a little bit overloaded and stuff in software engineering. But kind of thinking about user experience, but for developers, I think is a really good way to put that. So yeah, was just kind of interested in that. I know that that's kind of a common kind of branches to go off of. Like you might start as a developer or designer, it sounds like in your case, and then kind of branch off into either DevOps, developer experience, or even like engineering management and kind of stuff like that. And is there a particular reason that kind of the advocacy and developer experience route kind of appealed to you, and that you didn't go like maybe further into just writing code and developing, or even into kind of management? Or why did that kind of route appeal to you most?
Yeah, so I started 2 roles ago. I was primarily an engineer and UX designer, and building applications for clients and stuff. And I really, really enjoyed that, and I still do. But as I was doing that, I started teaching because we were working with mapping technology at the time, and it's something that I initially thought was going to be super scary, but it ended up not being too scary. So I thought, I should teach people to help get over that, hopefully make a difference in the world. And that started to broaden to other topics as well. And I just really enjoyed creating that content. So that's where I started to do it full time, where, part of my role is creating content, creating examples, and ultimately teaching people and helping build awesome stuff.
Gotcha. And is that also where kind of your YouTube channel fits in there as well? I guess I'm not totally sure how, if your YouTube channel also does a lot of Cloudinary stuff, or if you try to keep that a little bit separate, or kind of how do you kind of structure that side of things?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. And I think this is, so I'll talk about me personally, but this is also company dependent, because some companies are stricter about this than others, but which is, in my opinion, not a good thing. But in my case, I have the complete freedom. It's my channel. It's my my property. I don't get any influence from Cloudinary as to what to post on there, rightfully. Now, I do put some Cloudinary content from time to time, mostly just because I think it's cool. And like, I'm not trying to shill the products on my channel, but it's more so if I have something fun I want to teach or a cool use case, like that's where it'll come in, just like any other product that you'll find on my channel. But I intentionally make sure I don't post too often, because I don't want to lose that trust of the people who are familiar with my channel. But there was a time when I first started that I posted too much, and that's just because I was so excited playing around with Cloudinary, and I definitely made a conscious effort to avoid that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be tough too, because like you only have a certain amount of time in the day. So like in your day job, if you're learning a lot about Cloudinary and some of the technical details, and it'd be kind of easier for you to kind of create a tutorial because you've already kind of dove into Cloudinary and kind of the technical aspects, and then you can translate that into YouTube pretty easily, and it could help people. It's hard not to kind of just do that all the time, and to take more time out of your day to learn something separate and then create a tutorial on that.
Exactly. And, that's something also that's important for the roles like this, is to, teach as you go along, because that's when you're learning that's going to be the most ideal time to have empathy for others trying to learn that thing. So you're able to more put yourself in their shoes as you're kind of teaching the concepts, rather than being an expert on it and kind of lose sight of that.
I rather did the same stuff, like not trying to do, like my YouTube channel is mainly focused on like JavaScript and React, but in my day job, I do a lot of like Django stuff and like some API stuff. And it's like, I've done a couple videos on my channel, but they do so terribly because my audience just wants like React to Next.js stuff. So it's like, all right,
Right.
I'll try to focus on that a little bit more. But very cool. Was just kind
Yeah.
of curious and kind of why you chose that route and all that stuff. And I totally agree. I think that by creating tutorials and trying to teach people stuff, it's also a good way to kind of solidify that knowledge in your own head and to kind of make sure that
Yeah.
you understand it well. And for me, it like exposes things that I don't really know. I'll get a comment on a YouTube video and it's like, very good question. I have no idea what the answer to that is. I should probably know that. So it's a good way
For
to
sure.
kind of facilitate your own learning as well. So
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of times I've learned little details by trying to break down the concepts into something that I could more easily explain. It's just, all those little things start to pop up as you're getting deeper into it.
yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, what kind of, I know your YouTube channel, you have like some React and kind of Next.js content. What kind of got you into the React world and that sort of thing? I'm guessing maybe it stemmed from your design background, which kind of led to kind of some front end stuff and that kind of led into React, or what's kind of the story there?
Yeah, so the first time I started playing around with React was, I want to say, it was at a company called ThinkGeek where I was rewriting their mobile checkout. And at the time we had it separately maintained. And React seemed like a super amazing option for being able to provide that in-browser interactions, interactivity. I ultimately didn't go with it at the time simply because I didn't want to drop it on the engineering team who had no idea how that works. And like I kind of planned on leaving at that time. So I didn't want to, just drop that and bail. I don't think that would have been good. So I ended up going with handlebars in that case. But later at my next role, I came back and the first real interaction with it I had was integrating it and rewriting some UI for a large video streaming site. From there, started building some new apps from scratch for things like a satellite tasking dashboard, which is where the mapping tech came in. And just kept spending more and more time with it throughout that process.
And did you find anything like particularly challenging when learning React, or did anything kind of jump out at you to like, man, I either really don't like this or this is really kind of hard to understand or anything like that?
I was definitely having a hard time when I was first trying to learn it. I can't remember the specifics. I think it was around how the like non-JavaScript was working inside the browser and getting all that processed. I can't remember exactly, but I remember what clicked for me is when I started to think about it as just JavaScript with HTML as a sort of template. Like that's where it really clicked for me. And I was able to start becoming more productive and kind of reason what was going on, especially when you start to think about, I forget what it's called, but I don't know if you've ever seen where it's like an object and it shows the shape of the data as opposed to the JSX. It's the object shape of it. Being able to see that and realize it's just JavaScript just really made it make more sense for me.
Totally. And I think that where like there are definitely some fundamentals of React that you kind of need to know to be able to like debug and kind of understand things fully. And I think that a mistake that I've made that a lot of people make when learning a new technology is like just jumping straight to like right into the code and building stuff. And there's some stuff like that can be good. It can be good. It's like good that you're being proactive and you want to build stuff, but you do need to understand like the fundamental concepts of a certain technology or it kind of will come back to bite you. And I know
Totally.
for me personally, when using React, one kind of hard thing is like when I was learning it probably 5 or 6 years ago now, it was like kind of around that same time to where React was transitioning from classes to hooks. And it was kind of also around the time to where Redux was super popular. So it's like you need to learn Redux, React, classes, and hooks all at the same time. And it's like, what is going on
It's
here?
a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. And I think the component pattern, the functional component pattern really simplified. And I don't know enough about the very intricate specifics about JavaScript to say whether classes are good or not. I know people go back and forth on that. But the class syntax was definitely scarier for somebody who's new to the JavaScript ecosystem, and trying to reason about that as opposed to a simple function that returns a component. So I think if you're jumping in right as it was transitioning, that would especially be hard trying to get all of that at once. But I think where we're at now, in my mind, is a little bit easier if you're jumping right into it now.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think that for me anyways, I don't love using classes in JavaScript. This is a whole rabbit hole though that people get opinionated with.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they are just kind of like syntactical sugar in JavaScript. So it can make things a little bit tricky. And then there's some kind of hard things about using the this keyword. And you would also run into that with React, with using class components and needing to do like binding and stuff like that, to where you just don't have to worry about as much of that stuff with hooks. Now, there's definitely some tricky parts about hooks as well, but I'll take those tricky parts over the classes kind of any day.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, hooks are an interesting thing because I think once you kind of like, they're definitely difficult to get up, but I think once it kind of again clicks for you, like once you kind of get a grasp as to what especially dependency array, like once you kind of have an idea of how that invokes the new the effect every single time. For instance, I guess I was thinking about use effect. Like I feel like that starts to get a better way to understanding what's happening.
Totally. And I think that now with using like Next.js and stuff like that, and kind of using that for like data fetching, to where maybe you have to use less and less kind of use effects and kind of some of those trickier hooks, that can also be really helpful for a lot of people. But I would definitely say JavaScript first, actually learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript first, that kind of basket. And then from there, go to React. And then from there, go to Next.js. Would you kind of agree with that as well?
Yeah, I'm torn. I definitely think that people need to know the fundamentals. But I also, on the other hand, I guess it's like, know the fundamentals, but as you're jumping into it, like I don't see an issue with somebody spinning up a Next.js application. And the reason I say that is because once you have that application, I guess it was more so with the pages router, with the file-based routing, which is probably easier for a newcomer to grasp, I would think. But once you have that shell, you can just write HTML inside of it. And, that could also be a good learning place because you don't have to worry about all the other stuff that comes along with spinning up the application. Now, of course, just writing vanilla HTML and CSS, that'll always work on the internet. And it's amazing how some people forget that. But yeah, no, I could go either way.
Yeah. And I totally think that you should learn like the fundamentals, but not spend like too much time on trying to like memorize every single little thing when it comes to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like, learn the concept and then kind of move from there. And like you said, there are some nice parts about if you did just kind of go to Next.js to kind of learn React within Next.js, that could be helpful because then you don't need to really worry about setting up like React Router DOM or some sort of routing system. Like, it's kind of just there for you already. And you can also have like Tailwind CSS set up as a template right out of the box and have a lot of things kind of there for you, to where you could just maybe focus on React a little bit better. Now with Next.js App Router, you have to kind of worry a little bit more about like server and client components and kind of that whole thing and caching. And then you also have like whether you want to define API routes or server actions. And there's a lot you could kind of go down to there, but I totally see your point there as well.
It's definitely become a lot more complex, and that's a good thing in ways because it gives more powerful APIs to build, more powerful applications. But it's also like, I have to imagine the learning curve with all those concepts, specifically caching, is just challenging for people trying to just spin up their first React application.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And how did you kind of transition into Next.js? Did you kind of go the kind of classical route of learning React first and then kind of playing around with that for a while and then kind of slowly transitioning into Next.js, or what did that kind of look like for you?
So generally speaking, so I was doing a lot of vanilla React, had to write way too many Webpack files. That was an experience that I don't miss, but I think it was valuable in helping me understand what was going on with the technology. But so the first framework that I started playing around was Gatsby. And I remember like just my mind being blown with Gatsby, and compared to writing a vanilla React application, it was just, leaps and bounds better. But I remember at one point in time, there was turmoil in the Gatsby community for one reason or another, but that led me to give Next.js a try. And, I haven't looked back since.
Absolutely. And I think that Gatsby definitely, like, I think it's still popular and it's still used by a lot of people, but there was like definitely a time period to where Gatsby was like the game in town. Like, it was like everybody was going to Gatsby, especially for stuff like blogs and kind of more static sites and stuff like that. Gatsby was like kind of the go-to solution. I'm not super familiar with like the current state of Gatsby right now because I've also kind of gone towards Next.js, but yeah, kind of cool to hear your progression there. And for Next.js specifically, is there, similar to React, is there anything that jumped out at you, like anything that you particularly really liked about Next.js, or anything that you kind of really didn't like so much and you found it really hard to learn, or anything like that jump out at you?
I think the biggest thing, like going back to the pages router, is where, my entryway was, and like the data loading story to me was just very compelling from a developer experience perspective. I found it to be really intuitive. I know some people claim the opposite, but being able to kind of reason about that, ultimately you had React components and you were getting data that feeds that as props. Like I found that concept to be very straightforward, and that coupled with the page routing, I thought was an easy way to reason about how you're building a website, and just that overall developer experience was really compelling and made it so that I could be super productive in building applications.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that, for me, I really liked that you had the out-of-the-box router. I didn't have to set up like a React router DOM. Like that was pretty much my favorite part right there. It's like,
well, now you can't upgrade to a Remix application. I don't know if you're watching ReactConf, but
no, I haven't caught it yet. I definitely need to catch up on some of the React Conf stuff though. Just because like I feel like there are like some React felt like pretty stable for at least a handful of years there, but now it starts to feel like with server components and some of the different stuff they're doing, like finally having suspense and stuff like that, there's like a lot of other kind of cool things that you can do there, which kind of brings me to, is there anything this year that you're particularly looking forward to kind of learning, or any kind of topics that are on your mind that like, hey, I need to learn this, or anything that you're actively learning that you're kind of excited about?
Yeah, so I'm generally just trying to get myself more familiar and more experience with things like the server and client boundaries, like how you can create like an application that allows communication between those different components, because I don't think the story is quite there yet for how things were set up, and I'm excited to see some more of the advancements. React 19 was just put into release candidate, I believe, and then we'll have Next 15, I think, coming out next week. So we'll see what they release. But generally speaking, just trying to get myself more familiar with the React APIs that are coming out. There's some cool stuff like the transitions, which feels a little bit bulky, but allows you to do really cool things, still kind of tied to that whole React-oriented mindset. And yeah, I think that's mostly what I'm trying to spend time with right now in the React world.
Yeah, lots of upcoming changes. I know that React, they also have React Canary that can allow you to kind of play with some of these features that are about to be released. And I've played around with some of those as well, and it seems pretty cool. I haven't. I need to look more into like what's coming in Next.js 15. I'm kind of late to the party there a little bit, but I definitely need to familiarize myself with what they might be coming out with, because I'm guessing there's articles out there on like what's coming soon to Next.js 15. Are you familiar at all with what's coming soon, or?
So like it's mostly what I've been seeing on Twitter, like people like the PRs going into Next 15. I don't think they've publicly announced anything aside from just being teasing things. Like my understanding is it's going to have an updated caching system for how to try to make that, I guess, more intuitive and all. Yeah. So while there's little bits and pieces, I think they're still trying to wait for the launch to do some of the bigger things I would expect.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, to kind of transition into a different topic that I kind of teased a little bit at the intro, what do you think about this whole artificial intelligence thing? Do you think coding is worthless now and that we're all kind of screwed, or what do you kind of think about all that?
Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe one day we won't have to write code. I think we're far away from that. Like just trying to think about how those kind of things echo through the entire ecosystem, like big enterprise companies, governments, and all that stuff. Like I think there's going to be a need for people who code for a long time. But that said, I think generally speaking, I think the people who are going to be able to succeed are people who embrace AI more. I haven't I'm familiar with a lot of the AI tools out there. I haven't fully embraced in my workflow because I don't think it's quite at the point to help me personally right now. But I think the people who embrace it more so than are afraid of it and try to go against it and those kind of things, I think the people who embrace it are going to be more well equipped into the future, who use it as a tool. It's not a replacement. It's a tool for you to become more productive and succeed.
Yep, and I'm very much so aligned with that. Part of me wonders if I'm just biased because my paycheck relies on it. That definitely could be played a role, but I totally agree. I think that, developers have always had productivity tools that have come out to where it's, better code editors, code completion, even using like TypeScript and getting some benefits there. And just these different developer experience things have been increasing developer productivity a lot. And at least I would like to think this is just another one of kind of those tools that is kind of going to help us out. And, like what you said, like even right now, if no new code was written from this day moving forward, which is just crazy to even say because code's being written right now as we speak. But even if that was the case, there's still going to be systems that are going to be needed to maintain over the next several years. And, like you said, software engineering, it's like a very dynamic thing to where you're writing code as a part of like a dynamic system to where maybe you have infrastructure in place to deploy this in Kubernetes and like you have all this different stuff going on. So I think that it's definitely going to help us like write code faster and like develop things a little bit faster. But with that probably also becomes like more new companies are going to be created and more new products are going to be created, which a lot more software is going to be created that people that understand software are going to be needed. Now, maybe our job isn't necessarily writing a bunch of code in the future, but it is at least still kind of working with software. And I think that software is going to be around for a long time, and software engineers are well positioned for kind of whatever job that looks like in 20 years. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Until our overlords take over.
Yes. Let's hope that doesn't happen too soon. Oh, man. You could definitely go into a rabbit hole of AI to where it's like, you'll hear people to where it's like, oh, it's inevitable that we're going to basically become like the pet to AI that go down that whole road. And it's like, oh my God, I don't even want to think about that. So do you have any kind of final advice or recommendations to developers listening to this? And it could be anything, whether it is, what to focus on moving forward to kind of level up their skills, or whether it's to go down a similar path that you have. Any kind of final advice for those listening?
I think that the biggest thing that I've always tried to push for people is, stay curious and build stuff. The best experience you're going to get is by simply building things, whether that's rebuilding your personal portfolio or blog post every year with new technology. You're getting your hands dirty with that tech. You're learning something and getting actual experience using it, as opposed to just, watching tutorials or my channel all day. Right. So I just encourage people to build stuff, build demo applications, and that's where you're going to get the most experience and help you succeed.
Totally. And that just reminded me, I've now updated my personal website in like 5 years, and I need to get on that here soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, building stuff is a great way to kind of learn new things, kind of dive in, not just spending all of your time watching tutorials. I think that's great advice. So kind of with that, Colby, where can people kind of find your YouTube channel or follow you on Twitter? Where can they kind of find you online?
Yeah, pretty much everywhere at Colby Fayok. YouTube, Twitter, those are my primary channels. And spacejelly.dev is where I write my articles.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.